I'm Sandra Begay. I believe you can see me on screen. I'm working from home today, so this is my apartment. All glorious background. I made sure I didn't put any crazy stuff in the background to distract you. So I've been at Sandia National Labs for 27 years now. I celebrated my anniversary last Friday. It doesn't feel like 27, but it sure adds up after time. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation, and I originally from the Church Rock area, and that's just outside of Gallup, New Mexico, and the Red Rock Canyons near there. And right now we're known as, interestingly enough, as the cash cow community of Navajo Nation, because we have the first casino that was put up, the Fire Rock Casino, and it's highly successful. And when they say cash cow, they mean a lot of the cash that comes into the Navajo Nation is coming from this economic development endeavor. I know people have strong opinions one way or another about Indian gaming, but that's kind of the name of the game within Indian country. If the tribes are able to do that, that tends to give them some extra capital and money to do various types of projects and community support. Let's see, I have my Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering and a Master's from the University of New Mexico. And I have my Master's of Science in Structural Engineering from Stanford University. Let's see, I've had the same type of job at 3 different national laboratories, out at Lawrence Livermore National Labs in California in the northern part near San Francisco. And then I moved on to Los Alamos National Labs in Los Alamos, New Mexico, north of Santa Fe. And then I landed at Sandia Labs in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's kind of an interesting career. I had that same job at all national labs as facilities engineer, specializing in civil and structural projects, all internal to our national laboratories. So I got a lot of good background on project management, and also I think sharing with you, interacting with customers. And when we work with tribes, you have to think about the work with them as they are your customer. People within the tribal communities have a lot of great need and challenges to address, and hopefully we can use our intellect and our academic backgrounds and also our passion to help the tribes with some of those things they're trying to address, hopefully with the technology that we learn about, but also a skill of listening. So throughout my presentation, I'm going to throw out a few of those hints, because part of my role, I think, is to give you some coaching tips and also mentoring tips. Coaching is real specific of, I'll tell you, what as a graduate student or as an academic student or as a staff member, what you need to do to try to make things better. That's real specific. Coaching and mentoring are a little bit different. Mentoring will be just general guidance that hopefully you can pick up that might be applicable, but coaching is specific to you, given the group that you belong to and the academic endeavors that you're taking on. So I've learned in my career to just be direct with people, because I can tend to be a little bit too nuanced and try to give hints, but I'm finding I should be a little bit more deliberate in saying, this is what works and this is what really hampers your experience in working with tribes. So I'll give you some of those tips as I see the examples come up through the different slides I'm going to show. So I've been very fortunate to have a job since 2002 to work with an office which used to be called Tribal Energy. Now it's called Indian Energy. It's very similar work. It's just the way it was put into play in the Department of Energy out of the federal government. So if we could go back in time to 2005, the Energy Policy Act was enacted by Congress and signed by George W. Bush. And that was an important endeavor. That the United States doesn't put in a new energy policy, but once every 10 plus years. It takes decades for them to put in a new energy policy. And so in that creation, they had a section specifically on Indian energy. And I tease people, I said, if you have insomnia and you really can't get your mind to give up what it's focused in on, read the Energy Policy Act in the Indian energy section and you go right to sleep, because it's just full of authorizations and legalese. The gist of it is there's an office that was created in the Department of Energy to support American Indian and Alaska Native tribes. And so some of the slides I'll share with you focus in on that office. And you'll learn from me that I like to give examples by stories, because that's the way I think people learn. And as Native Americans, we share our history by experience of stories and storytelling. And sometimes people think it's just a story, but I'm actually telling you specific information. And sometimes if some people don't understand, I'll be very specific as to why I told you that story. But if we go back to 2005, the Energy Policy Act was actually signed physically by the president at Sandia National Labs in Albuquerque. And it's a kind of a very unique thing to have the president come to your workplace. And the document itself was probably 200 pages printed. So all of us in our electronic age, they actually printed the whole energy policy, and the president, George W. Bush, actually signed it with a pen. It was wonderful history to be a part of that. With that, Sandia decided to allow 4 people to present in front of an invited audience of Sandia employees and Department of Energy officials. And I was one of 4 allowed to present in front of that audience. And the reasons why will be given forth in the slides about Indian energy, but there's about 10,000 people at Sandia National Labs. And many of you may know the statistics for American Indians that you'll see in a little bit later in the second presentation I'll give, has to do with there's very few. I've been on part of the National Science Foundation boards for different reviews, different programs. I was appointed for a 6-year term on a committee that reports to the NSF director about a committee on equity in science, equality, affirmative action. And so I was the voice that would say, don't forget the American Indians. We're a small river chart on all the details that you give for all of the minority groups. And I take it very personal because I know those people in that river chart. I know them by name. I know where they work or where they go to school. So don't discount the numbers, even though they're statistically insignificant, is what is usually said, because the numbers are so small. And just in specific, the way I would say, yeah, it may be statistically insignificant, but it's people that I know and people of tribal nations that are very important, that are really bridging the gap from learning about our traditions and moving towards technology and trying to help where the traditions are not hampered, and technology may help with the challenges that tribes face today. So that's why I tell you that story. 1 out of 4. I'm 1 out of 13,000 engineers in the United States. So if you put me in the University of New Mexico pit, our basketball arena, I'd be the only Native American woman if there were 13,000 US engineers sitting there. And so Carletta and I have some very interesting assignments that we get, great insights that we can give you, because we are so unique. People seek us out, and I think you should know that as you study and as natives in science, there's some very unique challenges that you will be able to support and help. So I will try to get you these PowerPoint slides, and I'll see if I'm able to be as modern as everybody else. As people kind of tease me, I'm old school. I said, oh, I didn't even know there was such a thing. But I guess that's what it is. Oh, it says host does not allow me to share, so I don't know how to change that.
Okay, let me fix that.
Thank you. I practiced before we all got online, and I was sharing it with myself, and it seemed to work. All right, I'm co-hosting now. Thank you. And I will go through these slides. Manuelito Chief was my intern last summer, so you'll see his picture within these slides. It took 20 years at Sandia to be able to get our corporate photographer, our Sandia National Labs photographer, who's a photojournalist and has had his work shown in Newsweek, Washington Times, different national publications. And this is a picture he took when we were at Acoma and hosted at Acoma Pueblo up at Sky City. But I really like to emphasize that it was deliberate in taking this picture, that when we talk about the future, some of us are a lot visual people. We need to see what that looks like. And this is what it looks like. You have to be able to see out vast distances. You have to see things clearly. You have to know where you're going. You have to know where your team is. So I had a team of interns that summer that were a part of this picture taking, and all of them are just wonderful individuals, and my interns I'm so proud of. But I wanted to start out with a visual of being able to see on tribal lands, there's ways to put up renewable energy like solar panels, and to be able to do it that illustrates that there are ways to be able to use technology that's very appropriate to tribes and what they want to have done with their energy resources. So here's a broader slide, the state of STEM for American Indians and Alaska Natives. One of the interesting comments about creating an internship program was, why are you focused in on upperclassmen, undergraduates, and graduate students? And part of this was getting community input that I had read about, all the way from caucuses of American Indian state legislators to the ACES organization. But I highlighted one that I thought really stood out, was creating initiatives centered around STEM leadership and systemic change within STEM professionals. And so that's the emphasis of this particular internship, but I also think it applies to who you are today studying, that we really need you to become a STEM professional. And if you are a STEM professional, then we need to work on systemic change. Because the bottom part, the last part of this slide that you see at the bottom of the slide, is what can keep me up late at night sometimes when I'm thinking about, what needs to be done. So when you compare American Indian and Alaska Native kindergarten students, only 7 of 100 of those students will eventually earn a bachelor's degree. And that's just not even a STEM degree. That's compared to 34 out of 100 white kindergarten students. So knowing your numbers, that's 7% versus 34%. So when we talk about the STEM pipeline or the pathway, this is where we're starting from. So I had a question from my director saying, which of your interns were non-traditional students? What I eventually came to answer him with is that all of these interns, you in the room who are students, are non-traditional, because it's a given that we have a lot of need in Indian country. There's a lot of hurdles we have to face, and what you might have gotten through with math or science through high school, and then to get into your undergrad, and then eventually onto your graduate degree, and then become a professor if that's what you choose, or your PhD. That is just non-traditional. It's highly unusual, and I like to say unique. Some people say it's an anomaly, it's a quirk, but let's take the positive road. It gives us some unique challenges, and I will say this again, you will be sought out because of your degree and what you want to emphasize, and hopefully through programs like this, you will learn the professional side of how do you take on customer feedback and present solutions that will help our constituents or our customers, like the tribes of the United States and Alaska Natives. So the other fact, I just pulled from the US engineering workforce a number, and this is an average, that each year only 75% of master's degree candidates are American Indian each year. 10 PhDs are in engineering that get their engineering degrees. So one of the directors I worked with one time said, we need to do all types of things of education. Why are you so emphasized, and why do you have such a low number of students each year? I said, hey, come on, you have got 2 out of the 10 in the nation working for you. That particular summer, we had 2 PhD students. I said, you're doing good. Rather than thinking we're not doing well, pat yourself on the back, because look, we got 2 out of 10. That's significant. And then he finally understood. And then he would tease him when he would introduce these 2 students. He would call them his Jedi Knights. And then I would pipe in later and I'd say, okay, director, you call them Jedi. I said, but do not call me Yoda. That's where I put my foot down. And you can joke and you can laugh. I have a funny sense of humor, so you'll hear that throughout the presentation. An overview. So it's taken, 16 years to get this pie chart and to get these numbers together. Numbers are important, statistics are important to track students, to actually understand how you're making a difference. I coded the pie chart to be students who are working, are no longer students or interns, but they're working professionally, and I have it coded by tribal, work in STEM, non-tribal work in STEM, and then those who are working for maybe nonprofits that are not STEM related. And then I have a few that are seeking employment. So you'll see that the majority of these former interns, 40 total, have been sticking with tribal STEM positions. And if not, they're sticking with STEM. So that's another highlight of the program. And then if you look at the graduation rate, this is just given because we're cherry picking. And I've been told that you're just going after the best and brightest. And I said, companies, academic institutions, they all do that. Why wouldn't we want to do that and have them become professionals so that we can have a bigger reach? And if one way to illustrate that is if you think of yourself as a rock and you're trying to make an impact and you think there's too many things to take on, throw a rock into a pond and watch what happens. You see a one concentric circle moving, and the movement of that one effort by that one rock, you can see how that concentric circle gets bigger and bigger. So think of yourself as you're the rock being put in the middle of a still pond. Sometimes you can see the closest circles from you, but you don't really realize how big those concentric circles come from your impact in what you do. So keep that in mind when it seems like there's too many challenges, that you do have an impact, and it is very well, I think, welcomed by professionals like myself. And I am grateful for what you're trying to do and what you're trying to study. So here's the numbers. 40 undergraduates and graduates have participated as of last year, 21 different tribal nations, 19 different majors. About a quarter, 23%, have been converted from a summer intern to a year-round intern, and about 15% we hired either through a Sandia full-time employee or a contractor. And this is unique. I don't hire by gender, I hire by application. So I've had both a Terry, T-E-R-R-Y, and I've had a Terry, T-E-R-I, one male, one female, but I judge them by their application. And I happen to have 64% female interns that have been a part of the program. And as I understand from some studies that women tend to try to find, if they can, opportunities to work with another woman in the field that they're studying. So I'm going to go quickly through some of these slides, and these are also on the Tribal Energy website, the Office of Indian Energy website. But one thing I'll tell you about Debbie Taywa out of Hopi. Some of you have maybe met her or know her. She was featured in the book by Winona LaDuke, All of My Relations. So I think I'm pretty savvy, and I think because of where you are, what you're trying to do, you're pretty savvy too. So you surround yourself by people who know more than you and who may have expertise that you don't have. And so because this work was more electrical engineering related, and I'm not an electrical engineer, Debbie taught me how not to electrocute myself. That was the basics. What is solar about? Teaching me about the practicalities of electricity and putting in solar panels, and about, power and energy efficiency. And Debbie had rolled up her sleeves and done a lot of great work at Hopi and Navajo. She does do some international work now, focused in on photovoltaics and renewable energy. But I thought this was a pretty good find that Debbie happened to be in school at the time, and I sought her out and said, okay, I'd love to make you an intern, because at Sandia it's easy to pull in students. And she said, sure, and I kept her until she graduated. The next set of interns, before I had solid funding just to bring in students, I pulled out opportunities. So one of the program officers on the federal level said, there's this program, they have 3 Indian students that applied, but they don't have specific work. And I said, well, send them to Albuquerque. I have plenty of work. So I had 3 interns that just sort of fell into my lap. Just real quickly, Keith Candelaria now works for the Bureau of Indian Affairs here in Albuquerque as a civil engineer. Valissa Sandoval is an electrical engineer working for Lockheed Martin. And Shawn Sebastian actually is works for a native energy company called Native Energy, where they work on tribal projects having to do with large-scale renewable commercial installations. Benjamin Marr we hired him and kept him. He's been at Sandia for a while. Sandia helped pay for his master's degree. Jennifer Coots was a unique MBA student that I pulled in because she had a very interesting MBA project about integrating solar as a small business. Colin Ben, you may know, he's at ASU right now. He used to be there at the University of Arizona. And then there's Debbie. Tanya Martinez, she's now working as a commercial solar developer in Southern California. And I kept Debbie and Jennifer till they graduated. Terry Batiste was the first renewable energy engineer that worked for the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority. And he was successful in helping Navajo use its money during the Obama administration, where each tribe was given a set of money to do energy efficiency or energy conservation means. And because Navajo Nation is the largest tribe, they got the largest formula allocation, and Terry was able to buy refrigerators for solar units on the Navajo, having to do these off-grid solar units. So because Terry was successful, the whole program was successful just by the number of people that were impacted and the number of dollars that were spent in that program. And some people call that the Recovery Act. ARA was another name for it, but that administration from the president was trying to get projects on the ground and off and running. Jonathan Byron, I hired, was my only freshman out of college. He had just finished his high school degree and was accepted to Michigan State. First job ever. Just to say this, I know people don't like it when I say this, but he was adorable. He just was first day. He called me 2 weeks before he started and said, you know, what kind of clothes should I wear? I want to fit in. And I gave him advice about how we dress at Sandia. It's kind of like the engineer look. And he just shined in his first time away from home and first time having a job. And now he's a food scientist that works in the Bay Area. Lonnie Sethnagini just joined the faculty at the University of New Mexico as a water resource specialist in their evolving indigenous planning program. Nick Johnson, I just saw him 2 weeks ago. He works for the National Renewable Energy Lab with the wind department, and he had been at Department of Energy headquarters for a while in the wind program. And this is different because it wasn't native wind, it wasn't Indian projects. We're talking all technologies with wind within the Department of Energy. He worked in that office as a program manager. Sherilyn Wilson works for Taos Pueblo. She's one of their environmental planners that does water quality studies. Geppetta Billy, she got hired by Sandia Labs, and she's our corporate planner for all of our 500 buildings here located in Albuquerque. Amanda Montoya just got her PhD from ASU, and I believe she's back at Taos Pueblo as their tribal planner. Carson Pete, you may know, he's up, I guess, from you guys in Northern Arizona University as a lecturer in mechanical engineering. Suzanne Singer has just announced that she's leaving Lawrence Livermore National Labs in California, and she's going to start a nonprofit to bring solar energy to Navajo. Pristine Gardenez worked as a planner in the Gallup region and decided to create a charter school in Navajo, New Mexico. So she's the administrator for that charter school. Joni Fuenmayor, I believe she's still working on the reservation doing solar panel installations. Logan Slock also, I believe, is doing some renewable energy installations along with other jobs that he's taken on. Tammy Allen is a procurement officer within the Department of Defense here in Albuquerque. Chelsea Chi works for the American Indian Science and Engineering Society and previously worked for EPSCoR New Mexico as their American Indian liaison. Devin Dick, I also believe, is out, and he's a solar installer on Navajo. Nora Kata, out of the Bay Area, is now working for a nonprofit in San Francisco. Colleen Cooley, I believe, is working for one of the nonprofits that was against the Desert Rock, maybe the Black Mesa Water Coalition, but I know she's with one of the, they call them NGOs, nonprofits, working on Navajo for alternative energy solutions. Jessica Rodriguez got her degree in GIS, and she's now in Alaska, trying to help map the lands of Alaska on behalf of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Nikki Tooley, I believe, is going in graduate school, and she'll continue on with her education. Shaylyn Trancosa, I believe she has been employed locally and with a nonprofit. Erin Cottay is a electrical engineering consultant doing design up in Santa Fe. Tommy Jones, that I think many of you know, works for the Department of Energy, Office of Indian Energy. He's a colleague of mine up in the Golden, Colorado office. Len Nessifer, I hope you guys all know Len. I believe he's there at the University of Arizona. Brittany Anstead is working for a nonprofit in the Michigan area, I believe in Detroit. Kimberlyn Cameron is working on projects at her home reservation, Standing Rock Sioux, and I believe she's also taking some graduate coursework. Jordana John is the new renewable energy engineer for the NTUA, Navajo Tribal Utility Authority, and her last project was a 25.7 megawatt solar plant near Kayenta, and they've turned ground for the second phase, equally as large in the same location. Rachel Gutierrez got hired by Sandia as a planner, so she's really using her degree for the Sandia, California site. Diane Fuller is a sustainability officer for a college in her hometown. Terry Allery is now the sustainability teacher instructor at the 3 affiliated tribal college, and I never can pronounce the tribal name for that, so I apologize. Catherine Hall is finishing up her master's degree at University of North Dakota. Christian Gould is looking for a job. He graduated from Columbia. He was an intern last summer, and all of you have met Manuelito Chief. So what's the gist of all of this? The idea is to create something that you think can be helpful to Indian country. And so one of the ideas I had is to start with an intern, and why couldn't I have more, and try to have them work alongside me as fast as I swim, or the deep end of the pond that I get into, they're with me learning and trying to understand what those issues are in Indian country. And we have 90 days to help them learn as quickly as possible, and giving them as many tribal examples as possible to meet people on the ground and kick the tires kind of thing. So as you can see from the screen, they're all doing great work as professionals, and I've talked about them individually, but you can see there are some graduate research that have really benefited Indian country from an academic standpoint. And the institutions we've recruited from are known for turning out the most American Indians and Alaska Natives in the engineering front, one specific stat. So part of that is to hopefully help you illustrate that there's ways to be able to support Indian country more on a day-to-day basis, and given your circumstance of institution, how could you do that by promoting interns? I think part of that is a learning experience for the intern. You get a good feel for the work, and the other may be you each get a look. So the employer gets a look at the student, and the student gets a look at the employer, and it gives you maybe in a summer's time frame to see if this is going to work. It's kind of understanding what each participant can bring to the work itself. So just an overview of the Office of Indian Energy, just because I talked about some of the work, just so you understand. It's really focused on strengthening Indian communities and looking at future generations in support of that. This solar farm is out in California. I believe it's the Soboa, S-O-O-B-A Mission Indians, and they have over 25 megawatts on their reservation to support power within the California region. And they're going forward with more solar installations for tribes because, as you know, renewables in California are very desired, and they're trying to put as many solar panels in place. Again, the mission of the organization from the federal government side is to really maximize energy solutions for the tribes and Alaska Native villages, and really trying to be a premier federal office to support what we can for Indian country. Why is everybody so interested in Indian lands? This is the why are you doing this is for versus other projects. As you may know, the Indian lands comprise 2% of the US land base, and it's estimated that tribal lands, if they're developed with renewable energy, could provide 5% of the total US renewable energy generation, total US. We're not just talking on for tribes and their energy use, the whole United States. And the Department of Defense is the largest consumer of power in the US. And so there may be some potential in the future if we ever get to green tags and carbon credits, that the US military might be a good potential shopping around for Indian energy. At this point, it's not viable because their explanation is that they have to buy power at a reasonable rate, and they need to buy power at the existing market rate. They can't pay extra because it's green or because it's tribal. They have to pay the going rate. Unless the Department of Defense secretary says, yes, you can do this, then every good soldier, every naval officer, every pilot will fall in line saying, yeah, we'll do this for each of our military installations. So you just never know what might happen, but that potential is there. So looking at the tribal reservations, 30% of the coal comes from tribes in the Southwest, 30% of the potential uranium reserves, and the uranium is controversial. So there is uranium on tribal lands. Whether they develop it, as you know, it's up to each individual tribe. And there are 20% of the known oil and gas reserves. What's interesting is this current administration is talking about all of the above solutions with energy, and that is why this particular number has been added to our presentations. The focus previously was just on renewable energy, but now it's on all energy sources.
Sandra,
Yes.
can't see your slides if you have a new set of slides.
Oh, okay. Let me see if we can get that. Sorry about that. Can you see that now?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, great. I'm glad you listened to the other, it's just like the commercial message, but I wanted you to know some of the statistics. If you need some of this information for your research or to give as a reference, please look through the DOE, Department of Energy's Office of Indian website, because there's some documents there that you might be able to reference, including these statistics have been gathered about Indian country and renewable energy potential. Interesting fact about Alaska, it has solar resources that are comparable to Germany, but Germany has more installed because of a federal mandate to put in solar. I think they have backed off some of that now, but at some point, some countries have made it federal legislation to support renewables and or solar. So that was Japan, that was Germany, and there's a lot of solar being bought by India and China. So those countries have helped the market for solar in the US for the prices to come down. There's some cool maps on the Indian website. So just so you can see a colored map, they're color coded by renewable energy resource, and there's some land-based tribes that you can see. The larger ones, you can actually tell where they are, but that tells you sort of the potential of Indian country. The unique piece of Navajo Nation that many of you may be aware of is that the potential on land base for solar, particularly solar, is vast because of the land base. But in fact, land use availability on Navajo is extremely limited. Most of the land is allocated for other uses. And to be able to get land available for economic development, business themselves, a large solar farm is really modifying existing land use plans that have been around for a long time. So the Navajo large plant near Kayenta is a unique project with the land itself, because the utility was able to negotiate with an individual family to give up their land grazing rights to put in the solar farm. And it's the same family that also gave the second phase that is now under construction. So when it comes down to some decisions, and you talk about the local level, it can come down to one family, and realistically on Navajo, it can come down to one grandma. And I'll give you another, for instance, on Navajo with that same example. Cameron, Arizona has a great wind potential up on those mountains. It's been tested. They had an anemometer up there for large scale wind power, but the individual grandma whose grazing rights are there, she said no. And when the grandma says no, you can't do anything about it. So that's the power that matriarchs have on Navajo, just as many of you know. So when we talk about these resources, you can see these numbers, but when it comes down to it, you really have to work with the community, the leaders, and whoever land use is allocated to be able to develop those lands. So that will always be an issue within tribes, is their land that's available and then the business case for that. I'm sure this is a little dated, but at this point in time, it was 573 federally recognized tribes. I think it may be 576. The Bureau of Indian Affairs keeps track of that number, but these are the statistics that really blow non-Indians away, as far as I can't believe this is what happens in the United States. It's like, yeah, that's why we put it in our slides, is because although there's these ample resources potential, energy security is really a major concern for our Native communities. People on the reservation pay disproportionately high electrical rates. There have been some solutions supported by the USDA, Rural Electrification Service. They have a grant that many people have taken advantage of because they pay higher than the normal rate for electricity. And then, as many of you know, the Rural Electrification Act back in the 1940s or so, 30s and 40s, bypassed most reservations. So our infrastructure is at least 40 years behind, if not 50. And it's constrained as far as transmission. So we have a reality of getting the electricity out and bringing it in, but also just the plain distributed energy within tribal lands is very dated and old. So many of these pieces, I hope you know that Natives are 3 times more likely to live in overcrowded housing and 11 times more likely to live without adequate plumbing. Navajo stands out in that respect, and also some of the many of the Alaska villages in the state of Alaska. There's higher than the average poverty and unemployment rates. And then this number we've been chasing around for years is more than 15,000 homes on Navajo that lack electricity. There's more up-to-date statistics. And if you really want that number, Manuelito has it in his paper that he wrote last summer. Again, Alaska Natives, they pay an outrageous amount of money for their electricity. And you can see these homes. I had somebody look at these slides and they said, is that for real? I said, yeah, that's the real conditions. So pictures are worth 1,000 words. Just remember that when you're giving presentations or trying to convince somebody of something. Data is very important, but if you can illustrate either by photos or videos, more power to you, and probably get your point across. I think I'll leave that as the end of my presentation, because I really would love to answer questions, and hopefully I can get this to stop sharing my screen and go back to myself. So please let me answer questions if I can.
Thank you, Sandra, for that presentation. At this time, we'll go ahead and open up to questions if anybody wants to ask.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'm Doug Morrison, the geography program here. Does the Navajo Nation not have any kind of eminent domain, anything like that?
No, no. It's a political battle on the local front that the central government may have written domain, but you still really need to work with the local community.
Any other questions?
I had a question. Are you strictly for your internship program looking at engineers, or are you opening up opportunity for other PhD students that's working in energy?
So unfortunately, with the constraint on the budgets this year, we're only going to have opportunities for undergraduates. But that's not to say the budgets could be increased in future years for graduate students because of the facts that I shared with you. We're trying to really have impact on those that are pretty far in school, and we're hoping to train those on with real projects in real time. That's kind of the emphasis, but this summer we won't have a graduate program. However, at Sandia Labs, we do have many graduate opportunities in energy and technology. So you really have to just keep an eye out for the sandia.gov website. And as a manager determines their budget and their needs, they'll put out a job posting. And this is the time of year they need to make a decision. So most managers are going to put a posting up by the end of this month. And it takes about a good 4 to 6 weeks to let it be open as a job posting, and then they'll make decisions after that for the start in May.
Any other questions from online participants?
So one of the pieces I heard previous to your start of this program was working with Navajo Nation this year in particular. I don't know if I heard this right. Has it to do with community level technology project, maybe utilizing geothermal heat or greenhouses? Did I hear that right?
With greenhouses.
So please utilize Manuelito's colleague has a paper that he wrote, did a great job. So this is by Christian Gould. It's on the Indian Energy website. He went through and did a lot of calculations to size the type of unit and compared HVAC versus other type of heating. He has some assumptions that you really could look through to determine. And the bottom line that I said is, don't put so much effort into, this is just a hint, don't put so much effort into the design of the greenhouse, but buy one from Costco. I mean, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about what plants, how much water it's going to take. Let's not focus in on the house itself, greenhouse itself, but look at the different models for heat. So that may be a great baseline to look at. There's also the food tax that has been put into play by Navajo Nation. So he also put a price where if a chapter bought into it, they could maybe utilize that tax to help with this project.
Sandra, this is Francine Gotchip, and I have a question. So when you are doing your program, in your pictures especially, you show the interns going out to the tribal sites and doing different projects. So I was wondering if you could just give us an overview about how you go about setting up your relationships or your partnerships with the tribes. Do they come up with the ideas? Do you come up with the ideas? Do the students come up with the ideas? Do you develop them together? How do you implement them? What is some of the follow-up that happens with the tribes after the internship is done? That sort of thing I think would be very helpful for all the students to hear how you go about developing the projects and then actually partnering with tribes and then the implementation.
Sure. So I think the bottom line is you got to develop a relationship. This is something that everybody involved will want to be cooperative and to see the support of why would you do this and where would it happen? And I just happened to visit certain projects when I was helping out with technical assistance, and I would meet the folks, the staff, the leadership, and they were very open to sharing their lessons learned. They had some really unique projects. So I think maybe just understanding that there are quite a few projects out there right now. Many are in the Southwest region, so you don't have to travel so far. But I added a piece up in the Northwest because we hadn't emphasized hydro. So I got together with the Bonneville Power Administration, and they have an American Indian Liaison Office. So I talked with those program officers, and they led me to one of the tribes that has their own hydro dam out on a river in Oregon. And so we were able to visit that tribal installation based on initial conversations, and then really building the rapport with the staff. It always helps that emphasizing the students and what they're trying to learn. I think most people I talk to are always welcoming of students to help highlight, showcase their projects and talk about the lessons learned. We had a great relationship with the Agua Caliente in Palm Springs. They're an interesting tribe because of a land use area. Most people don't know that the tribe, of course, the tribe was there before the city, but the city is surrounded the tribe. And so each acre of land, depending on which acre you stand on, is part reservation owned or part county owned or part federal government. And so the city is a cooperative of all those entities for land use. They have a tribal trading post up in the canyons, close to where it jumps up to like 10,000 feet, right at the bottom and the edge. So it's a unique place where they will never put in electricity for cultural reasons and aesthetics. So that's another uniqueness. The other is that it's considered a traditional trading post, and they are offering cold drinks when it's like 110 in the summer. So there's another extreme that they're having to work with. And the other extreme is very minimal sunlight in the winter, which actually was a very determining factor for how much solar they could put in because of the high walls of the canyon. And on both sides, from the east and the west, they had very limited sunshine. So that determined pretty much the size of the solar. And then the other is energy efficiency. So all those pieces came together of the tribe having a unique facility, some extremes in how they were implementing technology, a very cooperative tribe. So the tribal planner and economic developer welcomes our students every year, and he just really helps them illustrate that there are some tribes like in California that are extremely small, but they have very complex land issues and complex regulatory issues because of their size and their location. So that's kind of what I looked for, really looking for the friendly folks. Why start with something hard when you can start with those who are amenable to having people come? Another example that we're pursuing as far as field visits would be Picaris Pueblo in New Mexico. So right now they're the showcase of tribal projects within New Mexico. A very traditional small pueblo. The leadership bought in from day one. We did strategic energy planning. They wanted the solar. They don't even need all of the solar that's generated, so they have a power purchase agreement. They're working cooperatively with their rural electricity provider. They're so influential in that area that tends to be very, very conservative about technology that I heard that Taos Pueblo, who I think is very, very conservative from my experience, is actually saying, we want to have solar just like Picaris, because we see their solar panels, which are one of their neighbors. And now they're saying, hey, we need to have solar just like Picaris, which is, you know, an extreme example of cultural acceptance of technology. But the Pueblo governor, lieutenant governor, the future governor, they all bought in. And when you get that kind of leadership to buy in, I mean, things fall into place. And also their partners have been very amenable to talk about the project, from the rural co-op to the Northern Pueblo Housing Authority. So I'll give you, those are like some hints that go to a place that has success, people who are open to help students, maybe a tribal installation where the leaders have really bought in, so that it's not having people who are struggling to keep the project alive, but it's viable because leadership has bought in. And then unique circumstance, either by temperature or condition or political will, I think are really interesting, of how some tribes are able to just get it done, but it might have taken a decade or 2 decades to do. More power to them. Great examples for students to learn from.
Okay, Christopher Yazzie has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Have you ever been part of projects looking at energy needs for water demand in these native communities?
We haven't really emphasized water demand, but it's always in the Southwest a great concern because of the drought and the conditions that there are needs that they want to surface in rural areas, particularly with solar water pumping, also more localized water resources. And then again, on Navajo and Hopi, non-existent infrastructure having to do with water, because many communities and villages still have to haul their water. So unique solutions for those circumstances may be on the horizon. I've heard of several nonprofit organizations that have taken on those challenges, and they have a few pilot programs that have been going on both at Hopi and Navajo. So those would be interesting to understand who they're partnering with, how they're getting it done. And my thought is always, who's going to do the follow-up? Because there's great installations, right? But once the partner who has the equipment or the idea or the momentum, once they leave, who did they teach to maintain it? So the O&M, operations and maintenance, is always a question when you talk about sustaining these technologies. When I first started on Navajo with their solar, I heard all about the broken solar panels, non-working systems, because they were just pilots that were done here and there. So a utility model evolved, and there's also room and a big need for even nonprofits to get in there and support communities. So there's a lot of need to be addressed by multiple ways. And I don't think anybody really wants a monopoly. They want to give choice to the customer. And that's a good point about choice, having to do with resources, whether you develop it or not. Early on, we talked about traditional, maybe communities, but you always need to remember that we're not trying to change their tradition or culture. We're just trying to make their life easier. But it's always a choice whether they want to have that or not. And if people choose no, that's good. That's their own community or household's answer that they want to keep it that traditional. So pushing technology on people has never been part of what I've worked with. It's always been trying to give what we call a viable choice, that it's actually workable, and we're able to kind of see what happens over time. Just so you know, in Navajo, the anecdotal answer for the best solar customers are the elderly people. They were born in an era where they know how to conserve. That's their lifestyle, that's their mental thoughts. They grew up during a war. They know how to conserve, so they don't utilize their resources quickly. And then the opposite that I've seen and many have seen is that as we've become more modern and we want our gadgets and we want the convenience of flipping a switch and we want our iPads and we want our internet and we want convenience, that's more the modern age, and we consume a lot more power than people used to. And we assume that that's available, and it's not always available. We're talking about just trying to get them basic services at some point. So keep that in mind, that we like our bells and whistles because we're used to that, but some people have never had that. And so trying to make their life easier may be part of what we try to support.
We have another question from a student, Marcus Kleidus.
Yeah, Ms. Begay, I was wondering what do you think about the microgrid technologies that's storage of electrical capacity for rural communities?
Wonderful. That's the next wave of what's coming. Department of Energy has an energy storage program, and their program officer is real excited about helping tribal communities and tribal villages in Alaska. And you should know, as a resource to all of you, is Dr. Stan City out of Sandia Labs. He has his PhD in electrical engineering, but his specialty, and he has many patents in the systems of microgrids, and energy storage is his specific option. And he has a passion for tribal energy projects. He's actually carving out time within his main R&D work to work with tribes. So you don't see that very often, where you have a technology job that's full-time and then on the side you try to support tribes along with your technology. So that is a very up and coming area. They've got a pilot project going on Navajo Nation with a microgrid. The best, I'm going to give you my opinion, the best microgrid that's up and running and has an outstanding partnership is the Blue Lake Rancheria in California. North of San Francisco. It's kind of hard to get there, but boy, they are gung-ho. They are like a climate change community champion by EPA. They have all these wonderful designations as being a sustainable community. Their hotel and facilities are designated as a Red Cross relief area. So they've not just used the tribal resource to support the tribe, they're doing community resource and emergency planning. And they partnered with PG&E, so they are good buddies with their electricity company. They're doing pilot projects. They're doing tests with Microgrid. They get funding from the California Energy Commission. Oh gosh, they just are outstanding. They have an academic partner with Humboldt State. So there's ways that you can see where tribes are excelling with partnerships and being able to do things out of the box.
Okay, let's take one last question online by Maggie Carolyn. And Maggie, if you could also introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm a graduate student at the University of Iowa, and I do research on uranium on the Navajo Nation, so I'm very interested in this presentation. And one of the things I was interested in the report from the Office of Indian Energy was this emphasis on extraction and oil and gas reserves and coal and uranium on native lands. And I found it very out of step with the actual things presented in the report. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that emphasis, even though most of the emphasis has been on renewables. Thank you.
Sure, and you just have to see what happened in these last 2 years. Total new federal administration, different emphasis, and that's why you're seeing it. It's rolling down to my level with budget cuts and just really, they want me to put nuclear energy in my student intern job application. So it comes down to a lot of those details, is that's their emphasis, is energy all of above, and we want to extract and we want to develop, and that's just this administration, and I'm being quite honest with that. That's just the emphasis right now. Hopefully, we'll see some things change, because we really do need to address the impacts of extraction and all of those things that come along with maybe the more traditional fuels. At Sandia Labs, we had one of our experts tell Navajo Nation when they visited, they said, you know what, we get enough inexpensive and available and quick uranium from Australia that there's really no way to compete by getting it out of the US. He just was point blank. There's enough of the supply to meet our needs right now that we don't really need to extract uranium. And that's what he told the Navajo Nation. So I thought you should be aware of that.
Thank you, Sandra. We really appreciate you speaking to us today about your work. It has very relevant information for our program here.
Oh, wonderful. And thank you for my clunking along with technology.
No problem. And then for the rest of the group, I want to remind everybody that this is part of the Indigenous Food, Energy, Water, Security, and Sovereignty campus-wide seminar series. And our next seminar will be February 13th by Mark Sorensen, who's a teacher at Star School. And on March 13th, we'll have a seminar by Joe Tamici of Native Nations Institute at the Udall Center for Studies of Public Policy. And then finally, April 17th by Dr. Ronson Chi of Riley Engineering, a U of A alum that has done work on energy and water network distribution systems on the Navajo Nation. So please join us. We have a flyer going around, and you can join us remotely as well as in person at the ENR2 building on the U of A campus room in 595. So this time we'll go ahead and conclude this seminar series. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.